for a couple of moments, a bit of housekeeping. Most people probably want to switch their cameras off, but also please switch your microphones off. And as regards questions, there'll be a quick section at the end for a Q&A, but also if you have questions, please just drop them in the chat, and we'll record those and ask them at an appropriate time. So I will switch off my microphone now and hand you over for the first slide. Oh, actually, no, I beg your pardon. Actually, I'll just go through this one as well. My mistake. We're actually going to cover 4 areas today, and I've kind of just quickly been through those anyway, but quick intro to smart energy, local energy systems, quick overview of LEMA and the objectives and purposes of LEMA, and quickly go through its members. And then LEMA, although we're only a few months old now, we have actually already kicked off a fairly comprehensive work plan, which will only grow over time, but we'll discuss the initiative and the work plan. And as I mentioned right at the end, we'll just quickly cover the LEMA Summit as well. So I really will now switch off my microphone and move along to the next slide, which will be discussed by Simon Anderson. Simon.
Thanks, Matt. Hello to everybody, and hello, Helen. Nice to see you online. So I want to put a bit of context into this in the first place, because I think quite a few people aren't really aware of the value of smart local energy systems. So I thought it'd be worth starting with this. So I suggest that decarbonising energy has at least three major challenges. The generation, supply and demand. Generation, we're making pretty good progress with, and GB Energy will increase that progress as well. Demand, the government has a number of strategies, rooftop solar, which was enabled in the first place by the FIT programme, EVs, which are gaining in popularity, mainly because they're really nice things to drive, and there's a lesson there for us as well, and the electrification of heating. The bit in the middle, supply, though, is the bit which has really not been addressed, and actually is what is needed to bring these two together. And in some ways, the government is right in looking at how do we decarbonise the grid as the supply part of it. What we hope is that in doing that, they will understand the role and the importance that smart local energy systems can do in supporting that activity. So, what is a smart local energy system? This is a term which I think was coined by Innovate UK, or the Prospering from the Energy Revolution programme, which Innovate UK put on about 4 or 5 years ago. And the easiest way I've found to describe it is that most people understand a home energy management system and how that is used to balance demand with self-generation and storage behind the meter. Well, a smart local energy system does the same, but in a neighbourhood, in effect, behind the substation, and does it collectively. In doing that, one of the main benefits for it, and there are many benefits, but one of the main benefits is to enable connections of low carbon technologies to the grid before the upstream grid has been strengthened. So primarily there is a time value here because it enables connections and addresses the queues that are starting to build up before having to wait for the upstream grid to be fully strengthened. So the benefits then of these systems, as well as that addressing the local connection queues, they can significantly reduce the cost of energy for end users. So we reckon by at least a third, if not a half, depending on how the system is set up. It also will generate local employment and skills development, which is quite an important thing, because one of the barriers we see is the fact that consumers who have to effectively adopt these systems don't have a lot of confidence in the people who will fit them and support them and be around in 4 or 5 years' time when the first problems arise. And then because of all that, we feel it will accelerate the consumer adoption of solar storage and EVs and electric heating, and therefore speed up, accelerate the progress towards net zero. Could I have the next slide? So those benefits have been trialed and demonstrated in several occasions by the PFER program in particular, but the most important thing is that they are not yet financially viable. Because unlike the grid, there isn't an established market that the consumers can use to just plug in their purchases to it. And there are other challenges as well. I've talked about those and the benefits. So the local supply chain. Data is another one. There's an awful lot of data here which we need to exchange and manage. And that is quite complex to organize. And just generally organizing all of these things, getting the companies together, coordinating what's going, making them repeatable and simple to implement, all will make it, at the moment, is difficult to do, which makes it unattractive to investors and really unfathomable to the end users. So the situation today is that overall, the benefits of the smart local energy systems remain largely out of reach at the time when the business impact of the energy supply problems continue to grow in magnitude, which is really why we brought about LEMA. So LEMA is designed to address these challenges and to create a commercial market for smart local energy systems. It is, in that way, a different form of alliance. This is about a business development alliance. This is not a lobbying group. It's not a trade association or anything else like that. It is about how do we build a marketplace for these systems in order that the country can benefit from the benefits they offer. So that's what we're here to do. We reckon that the benefits from this form of flexibility, so behind the substation balancing to offer an alternative to full-scale strengthening in advance of that, actually are as big, if not bigger, than the opportunities found through domestic flexibility on its own. So this is a big market. It's a big opportunity. Next slide, please. So what we're here to do is a phrase which was coined by one of our founder members, solving the energy burden. So Cheryl is from West Midlands Energy, West Midlands County Council. And she coined this phrase because she feels she has to deal with an awful lot of people to get this moving. And then in the end, they're having to do it themselves. Actually, they reckon that what we can do is help that out quite considerably. So our job then is to simplify this energy burden and to unlock that commercial growth. So we're taking the initiative. This, as I say, is a commercial business opportunity. It is run by the industry. We're not exactly waiting for government to do something. And we have a business plan to deliver that, which we'll cover in a minute. Next one, please. So that business plan has 3 phases to it. So the first phase, which we're embarked on at the moment, is to generate the propositions, the solutions, the business models that will needed to create the market. We will then formalize or paper them, as some people say, the frameworks, agreements, and other documentation there, which will establish the approach, but it will also mean that you can do this far quicker. So in the early days, we talked to Carlo Holmes up in Scotland, and they took 4 years from the start to the actual implementation of a project. Our ambition is we'd like to bring that down to at least a year, if not less. And this is the way that we hope to do to achieve that. So this is all about addressing the practical issues of implementing and then learning and improving how that can be improved. And that's the third phase of the program. Next one, please. Another way of looking at this is about forming what I call an enterprise market. This is a fairly classic diagram which says that early adopters can get engaged in the market, but then this stops. And there's a real challenge to get from where the early adopters are, which generally are prepared to take some risk and can afford to take risk, into the mass market, into the mass market, which generally does not have that. And this is really, this is termed in a number of cases as crossing the chasm. It is about facilitating the business integration, and it is in this case about supporting a local perspective. So that's all the reasons why we feel we need LEMA and why we set LEMA up. Next slide. So this is now to hand over to Gavin, who will tell you about how LEMA operates, and I'll try and clear my throat so I can speak properly.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Simon, and hi all afternoon. Yeah, Simon's given a really good kind of introduction as to what local energy systems are and why local energy systems and the LEMA initiative is important, not just in the UK but also wider in Europe, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But I wanted to kind of cover in the next few slides about what kind of like LEMA as an organisation is, and then we can delve a little bit deeper into the work plan that LEMA actually has established with its current existing members as well. So the first port of call is what LEMA is as an entity. So LEMA is the Local Energy Markets Alliance. That probably won't have evaded you in the beginning part of this presentation. But what we want to make clear, and again, Simon's already alluded to this, but it's really important to us, it's an important message to share, is that LEMA is not a trade association. LEMA is an initiative. It's a project, and really ideally we have an end date and we want to achieve a goal. And in order to do that, we've set up an organisation to help facilitate that initiative, and that's what the Local Energy Markets Alliance Limited is. So it's a not-for-profit company, and it's established basically between Gemserv and Traxis as a shared partnership, but again on a not-for-profit basis. And our objective is to collaborate with the members of that organisation in order to achieve the goals of that initiative. And we work with the members from what we sort of determine to be a value chain. So if you imagine at one end of the value chain, we have, for example, the kind of investors or the financial opportunities, investment opportunities that there might be to be had in local energy systems. And at the other end of the value chain, you've got the end consumers and the people that will on the ground benefit from living in and using the benefits of local energy systems. And then in the middle, you've got all of the organisations and entities that either contribute into local energy systems, whether that be providing finance, whether that be providing assets, whether that be installing and maintaining those assets or managing the systems, or maybe it's even the people that benefit from the associated flexibility that comes from a local energy system, or the avoidance of the demand on the grid, i.e. kind of like the DNOs and the grid themselves. So there's a whole value chain of members that we're looking to attract to LEMA, and we've already got a good start on that. We've got some really key members that I'll introduce in a minute. And like I said, it's an initiative, so this is about participatory activity. We're again, not to sort of drain the point, but we're not a trade association. We really are about bringing together those members to participate in what we call as our kind of like backbone structure, common interest groups, and we'll go into a bit more detail on common interest groups in a minute. But these are really kind of like the main thrust of what we're trying to achieve. They're a set of key, like I say, common interest groups that have objectives that are set for LEMA as a whole, and those objectives are set by the members. And so we LEMA Limited in itself don't have an entire overall control over setting that agenda. We invite members to help us set that agenda as well. And we also invite members to contribute in their own working groups through what we call integrated project teams that sit underneath those common interest groups. We'll also, a little bit later in this presentation, talk about our annual summits, and that's really important because the summits, we avoided the term conference as best as possible, because really we want it to be about a really key feature in driving forward the initiative. So the summit is the bringing together all of our current members, all of the organisations that are potentially going to be new members for LEMA as well, and also those key stakeholders from in and around the industry. So, for example, from DESNES, from Ofgem, and others around, not just in the UK but Europe as well, in terms of driving forward the initiative. So, really a strong participatory based organisation. If we move on to the next one, Matt. So just quickly who we are in terms of who manages LEMA on the ground. So some of these faces you might recognise from your time in the industry, and some of them maybe not. But Simon, who we've got on the call, who spoke a minute ago, is the CEO of LEMA, and also the CEO and founder, or co-founder, I should say, sorry, of Traxis Group. And then Miriam Atkin, who's from the Gemserv side, is the co-founder of LEMA as well. And then we have a management team that runs LEMA on a day-to-day basis, and that includes myself as COO of LEMA, and then supported by Matt, who's comparing this call for you today. And then on the Traxis side, also on the call today, we have Philip Lewis, who's also a co-founder of Traxis Group, and a number of other key members of both Traxis and Gemserv as a collaborative team, and we're working together to lead LEMA on the ground. So you'll probably see our faces pop up quite often on social media, etc. If we move on to the next slide. So we've been going about just under 6 months now since. So LEMA as an organisation, as a limited company, was established at the end of 2023, and in sort of towards the end of February, beginning of March time, we actually opened ourselves up to membership from our sort of like a initial target member list, and so we have a set of founding members that you can see there on the left-hand side of the screen, and those founding members really are important to us because they help shape through what we call the steering group. They shape the kind of like the work plan and objectives of LEMA, and help kind of like steady the ship in terms of any differences of opinion in terms of direction that we might be taking. Now, that's not to say that other members don't have the opportunity to input as well, but we thought it quite wise to ensure that, because of our non-profit status, we had a series of founding members that also had kind of like a voice in how the Local Energy Markets Alliance progresses. And as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, we've got a number of ordinary members as well, and we're working on quite a few. We're working with quite a few organisations at the moment that are in the process of joining LEMA as well. Obviously, you can understand that I can't share their names today because they haven't completed their accession to LEMA, but this will be growing, quite quickly over the next few weeks and months. Okay, so I mentioned a couple of slides ago that we have common interest groups, and we have a work plan that LEMA is working to, and this is really the engine room of how LEMA members can collaborate with LEMA and the other members of the LEMA organisation. And so we've established 3 sets of common interest groups. We had a little bit of a play around with this in the sort of early days of LEMA, and we've really settled on these 3 by working with members of being the ones that kind of are most critical and at the right type of level in order to progress what we're trying to achieve in local energy systems. And we hold these common interest groups throughout the year, and not to get into too much of an administrative discussion, but really they run on a monthly basis, and they rotate each month, so that you have one of these common interest groups once per month, every 3 months. But the 3, more importantly, what the 3 are, is common interest group 1 is what we call networks, data and platform, or some people refer to it as networks, data and system as well. And so we're really talking there about the data and the systems that will enable local energy systems at scale to be deployed, and those kind of like market relationships that will need to exist in terms of interaction with the markets, interaction with critical stakeholders like DNOs and grid, etc. That sits in that group. The second common interest group is what we call consumer first, and this is really, I suppose, starting with understanding the economic model of the local energy markets, and also understanding the proposition that there is for the consumer, because clearly, as we all know from experience, if it's not attractive or understandable or reasonable to the end consumer, then we're going to fail at the first hurdle. And we can't kind of like operate in a microcosm of thinking that it's going to be understandable to the end consumer. And then the final common interest group is place-based. So this is really about the optimal and best way of actually deploying local energy systems on the ground. So this is about where they are ideally best deployed. This is about how they're deployed in terms of what sorts of delivery structures are required, people who can go out and actually install things at scale, and then beyond that, how those things are maintained over time. So all of these things are quite critical for the success in the long term. And one of the reasons why we are really keen on having local authorities, for example, as members of LEMA, is exactly the point about place-based, because as we've seen from the recent outcomes of the election and local energy plans, place-based is absolutely at the centre of net zero, and especially of local energy systems. Okay, move on. So I'm not going to go through this in too much detail, but this is just taking it an extra level down in terms of what the work plan for LEMA is. I think one of the first places to start is that we are a European-wide organisation, and so a few of our members are already from European background, so they are not GB-based organisations, they're European-based organisations, and they have specific interests in getting involved with LEMA so that they can progress on the European stage as well. And we are starting from the GB market perspective, because that's kind of like the market that I suppose is most ripe and opportune at the moment for us to be able to progress local energy systems in. However, we do have our eyes on moving LEMA into European markets as well when the time is right. And I think we've referenced the Netherlands here because we sort of feel that the Netherlands is probably one of the best and most similar markets that could ideally benefit from local energy systems in the near future. In terms of our approach, from a timeline sense, again, draining the point, we're not a trade association, we're an initiative, we're a project, and so we've got dates in mind, timelines in mind, and so we kind of try to stick to this sort of 3-year model of what we want to achieve. So really in 2024, the rest of this year and into next, we want to continue to develop propositions. So this work has already started, and we've already held a number of our common interest groups to date already. And then moving into sort of like 2025, we want to take those kind of like developed propositions, and we want to develop the artifacts, and papering was the term that Simon used earlier. in terms of how we contractualize that end-to-end vision for how local energy systems will operate. And then 2026, our sort of stretch target here really is to be able to prove that local energy systems in kind of like the LEMA vision works and have some real world deployments. And that's very important to us, to have kind of like real world case studies that where sort of LEMA's model has been deployed on the ground, and then we can repeat that, and that's the ultimate objective, is to have repeatable, commercially viable and scalable local energy systems that operate all over the country, that operate to the same sort of framework and controls. And below is a kind of like list of examples of the sort of artifacts that that would exist or are being worked on at the moment, indeed, by a number of our working groups and common interest groups. We'll send out these slides as well to you guys, so that you can actually see this in a bit more detail. Okay, I think the next slide might be my last slide. So this isn't a sales call, not by any means, but it is the case that LEMA is a membership organisation, and so you benefit from the outputs of LEMA by being a member. And so really it's about sharing the burden between members of achieving what we want to achieve with LEMA, but by sharing that burden and inputting into LEMA with your kind of organization's input, you also benefit from all of the outputs. So there is no restriction on LEMA's outputs that other members have put in, or that LEMA has developed itself. And if you're a member, you get access to that as a right of being a member. And from an administrative point of view, you get seats at common interest group table, so 2 seats at each table, and then you also get to join our annual conference. I've said conference there, I should have said summit, sorry. You get to join our annual summits as well, with two free spaces, and that actually can be quite a lucrative opportunity. But in terms of our Alliance membership, we have a tiered membership structure, and this really is to reflect the importance of us making sure that there's accessibility from smaller businesses as well as larger businesses. We don't want to restrict small organisations from being able to participate in this and achieve the benefits of LEMA. So we've been quite careful to make sure we have accessible pricing for our membership. And as you can see, we go from a micro business tier all the way through to multi-business agreements that we can discuss directly with each organisation. But I think the key thing to say here is that LEMA is a non-profit organisation again. So the pricing that we present here is not about Gemserv or Traxis making profits out of LEMA. It's about us covering the administrative costs of running the alliance. And we're not here to make multi-millions of pounds out of LEMA, but maybe there are opportunities with each of our businesses to succeed from the outputs of LEMA and using those to develop each of our businesses. So there's a business development opportunity for all members that join LEMA in its own right. We also do have some other membership types as well. So we recognise that that public sector membership is slightly different, and also that's also true of charitable organisations as well. So we have a set fee for those entities, and we don't intend to have charges for observers that sit in, say, the government or regulator category. But if you are interested in LEMA and joining LEMA and benefiting from it, then do get in touch with us. Get in touch with me or Simon, or go through our websites or LinkedIn, and we can discuss in more detail these arrangements and how you'll benefit from LEMA. But I think I'm now handing back to Simon.
Thanks, Gavin. So that brings me on to the summit. And actually, if any of you are thinking about joining or would like to know more, the summit is a really good opportunity for you to get to see what it is that we are doing, and talk to others who are already members or also considering joining LEMA. So this is taking place on the 1st and 2nd of October, Tuesday and Wednesday, the 1st and 2nd of October, a month before the budget, but about 2 months after the government's come into place. So it's actually quite an opportune time to find out what on earth is going on here. And in particular, our keynote speaker at the outset of this is Patrick Alcorn, who is head of local net zero at DESNZ. And then talking to him a couple of days ago, he was telling me about all that is going on in government at the moment and how trying to get it all organized and pointing in the same direction is quite a challenge for him. So it'll be really interesting to hear what he has got to say around this area. And he has a huge amount of experience of these sorts of things, of trying to get things done locally. We're also there expecting to have a senior member of SSEN to give their perspective on the grid and on the distribution networks angle on this, and possibly also Juliet Davenport to give a perspective from an energy retailer and the challenges of actually trying to break down the status quo from her perspective. So quite an interesting starting point for this. But in general, what we're looking at is helping people to connect with industry experts, get an insight into what's going on. The aim of this thing is much more about allowing people and giving the environment for people to have conversations with each other and develop things on, rather than just be sitting and listening to numerous presentations. So it is very much about active contribution there, and to get to know others in the area and to build business development opportunities, for want of a better word. So as it says here, LEMA members have free summit tickets. And what we're also saying is that if anybody who comes to the summit and joins LEMA shortly afterwards, we will refund their ticket price against their membership fee there. Go on to the next slide, please. So the cost of it is there on the left-hand side for those who are not yet members. I've talked a bit about the sessions that we're doing. So day one is very much a UK focus. Day two is much more a European perspective, bringing that in as well, comparing and contrasting what's happening in Europe, how are they addressing the same problems with what we are doing. Probably the heart of what is in here are these roundtable sessions, which are discussion sessions between a number of the delegates and a number of panelists. But instead of it just being a panelist sitting on a stage talking to each other, the panelists will be in the body of the audience and will be part of the conversation. And so there's a great opportunity here to get involved, talk about things, find out what's happening. And were you to sponsor and become one of those panelists, then the other element here is that we've been asked by Innovate UK to do a report on the summit, which they will then publish to discuss, to demonstrate the progression towards smart local energy systems, which they kicked off. And those people who sponsor will have a page, half page in the report to put across their particular perspective. The other thing to mention here is the dinner. So at the moment, we have an invitation out to Jürgen Meyer, who's been nominated, or not nominated, been appointed as the chair of GB Energy, to come and for dinner and give an after-dinner speech. I think it'd be really interesting to hear what he's got to say and what his perspective on what the community energy aspect of GB Energy will be, and to make sure that he takes into account what smart local energy systems can do. We also have a couple of other invitations out, but we'll see how they come. But Jürgen Meyer is probably the most likely one at the moment. So all I can suggest is that encourage you to come to the summit to find out what's going on and join the growing body of opinion who are absolutely of the feeling that smart local energy systems are a key part of the future decarbonising the grid, and therefore a huge business opportunity for all of us. Back to you then, Matt.
Yeah, thank you both, Simon and Gavin. I mean, that pretty much wraps everything up, I think, for today. Unless there are some questions that anyone attending here would like to ask. And I know that both my colleagues presenting have been pretty comprehensive in the information they've provided. But at this point, are there any further questions, any more information that is required from anyone attending? And at the same time, if maybe a follow-up question a little bit later on after we've wrapped up, please do just drop an email to any one of us, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
So I think Brendan is typing, but if anybody wants to raise their hand as a way to ask a question, that's equally good.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you, Brendan. Yeah, so if that is very much the case, then as always, if you want to find out any more about LEMA, these are the addresses, but clearly you know enough about it because you've already signed up for this. Helen, please unmute yourself.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm very excited to hear about your progress and how far LEMA has got over the last 6 months. I have two minor questions just out of interest. One would be whether you already have an organization as well that brings in the energy poverty side of the consumer into perspective, since that is a huge issue, especially in the UK.
I don't know, Simon, do you want to take that one more?
I'm also happy to answer that as well.
Which one would you prefer, Helen?
We'll talk at the same time.
Yeah,
First
thing I would say is that a smart local energy system covers all the buildings, or potentially covers all the buildings behind a substation. And that will be a mix of commercial buildings as well as residential. And within the residential is likely to be affordable homes as well as normal privately owned homes and rented homes. And especially as in the UK, as we build new developments, one of the requirements of those developments is to have a balance of homes in it. And one of the great things about the local energy system is it is effectively shared energy, and therefore you are able to share across that, and everybody will make benefits from it. So we certainly see that this doesn't exclude people who are perhaps unable to afford these things. And part of this is because of the financial models that we're bringing to it. And also, I think it will address the energy poverty aspect of it by bringing down the cost of energy to the end consumer. All the time we're seeing that prices are going up, and the whole thing about network strengthening is who's going to pay for it in the end? It's going to be the consumers. So we have to find a way to make it far more beneficial to consumers. Otherwise, they're not going to adopt it.
Yeah,
I think probably a more direct answer to your question, Helen, as well. I don't think we strictly have an organisation that is has that as their main point of being or objective, but we certainly would welcome those organisations. So, if you have either your own organisation or recommendations of organisations we should be talking to, then we'd be really keen for you to put us in touch with them.
Definitely. Just to add my 2 pennies as well, I can't add anything really much more material than what Gavin and Simon already said, but it just going back to our common interest group, which is consumer first. I think underpinning that is the idea that there is this just energy transition, which is a phrase that gets bandied around a lot, but I think it's very much part of that consumer first work, because ultimately in any transition, or the energy transition certainly, if there are people left behind, then it isn't a transition. In order to be a full transition, everyone has to be taken through it. And that's very much a sort of central tenet to the work of LEMA. But as Gav rightly says, we don't actually have an organisation that focuses on that as a speciality. So if you or anyone else attending does know of one, then that would be a really good contact for us. But thanks for your question.
I'm going to come back with a couple of other things. I think part of the reason that we have West Midlands, GLA, West Sussex as members, Greater Manchester, Bromford Housing Association, etc., all interested in joining is because they are interested in this particular area.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing to that is that Cheryl Hile is one of our founder members I've just been talking to. She's going to introduce us to Ravi Gurumurthy, who's the CEO of Nesta, and Nesta is the UK's innovation agency for social good. So this is very much within our area of interest, and it has to be, because this cannot just be about those who can afford to buy solar panels, etc.
Yeah. Fantastic. No, very happy to hear this. And another question I have is, that just comes into my mind because half an hour ago I made a survey that was sent to me from Envid Europe about the workforce in the energy transition, and whether, like, topic that came up all the time in the survey was whether the industry works enough with universities. Do you have, for example, University of Reading has a huge energy demand research center? Do you collaborate as well with universities? Maybe that could be interesting.
I have to say the answer to that one is no. I think an element of this is very much about the business development and the timescales involved. But that's not to say that we would not engage with them. It's just that they haven't particularly been our target.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the skill base is absolutely right. And that is why I touched on it a couple of times, because the practical difficulty on the ground of getting companies to employ people who have the skills to be able to install, service and support these systems is one of the crucial parts of this. It's also one of the big costs, because the number of different skills that are needed and the number of people that are needed to do it. Whereas in fact, I feel you should be able to have a smart home technician so that one person can do the IT as well as the electronics and all the rest of it. And you don't have to have half a dozen tradesmen in to install just the one system. So there's a lot in that area to go with. And indeed, on our place-based common interest group, this was one of the topics which they were very interested in as well, because local employment and getting benefits into the local area is a huge part of this.
Interesting. I mean, even the topic itself and your approach of combining so many members and all the different expertise shows that just one company alone cannot do it. You need the expertise and the skills of different people together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think with the point about universities as well is that whilst well, let me start again. One of the objectives of LEMA in terms of collaborating with members is to also benefit from their own collaborations. So it's kind of like a spider's web, I suppose you could call it. And I know a few of our members. I mean, one of our founding members, actually, Big Spark, is a good example of this. They do a significant amount of work with universities as part of their own product development, and it would be similar for some of our other members. Energy Systems Catapult will be an example as well, where their extended networks will really be of a great value to LEMA as they bring their ideas to the table.
Okay.
That's absolutely right. Well, thank you for those questions, Helen, very much.
Thank you for answering.
we're kind of at time now, a couple of minutes past. So thank you to everybody, A, for joining, and B, for sitting through the
sitting through it all
with us. I think it's about time to wrap up now. So just final call for any final questions. And if not, like I say, please do get in touch if you have anything further to add. We will circulate a copy of these slides. And thank you, Mike. Thanks, Brendan. Thank you all for joining. And we will be, I think, starting to host more and more webinars, perhaps on a monthly basis in the near future. But thanks to everyone for joining, and wish you an excellent rest of the day, and indeed rest of the summer. But thanks everyone, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.